Janet Jackson entered the courtroom in silence. Her face was calm, but her eyes carried the weight of decades as the crowd murmured behind the glass. A strange tension filled the air. It was not just another witness statement. This was different. This was blood. This was family. She was handed a sealed envelope by her legal advisor, but instead of sitting down, she walked straight to the front. She did not wait for permission. She simply spoke. My brother tried to warn me. I just did not know what he meant. Not yet. The judge did not interrupt. No one did. She placed the envelope on the stand and looked straight ahead. It was the summer of 1998. Michael had invited me to Neverland. He liked when I came up there, when it was just us. No cameras, no rehearsals, no handlers, no lawyers. We talked late into the night. He told me about things he said people were trying to break him. He said he felt watched all the time, and not just by fans. It was deeper, it was darker, and it was calculated. He mentioned names. One of them stuck with me because I had heard that name before. Sean Combs. He told me Diddy was not just a rapper or a producer. He was something else, someone with reach. Michael said he had seen people disappear. He said people owed Diddy and could not get out without a cost. He said he had once seen something he should not have. And from that point things changed. I thought he was just tired, overworked, paranoid, but after what has come out now, I believe him. Every single word. Janet looked toward the defense table. Diddy sat motionless, staring at her as if trying to remember what she knew, or maybe what she had seen. She continued. Michael once told me, if anything happens to me, know that it was not an accident and it was not drugs. He said, if I am found gone from this world, ask questions and do not stop asking. That line stayed in my soul for years, and on June 25, 2009, when I got the call, I froze, not because I was shocked, but because deep down, I had been waiting for that call since he said those words. His body was found. His heart had stopped. But my brother was a dancer. He was a fighter. He was strong. His body did not. Just stop. My brother did not go easy. I went to the hospital and I demanded to see him. They tried to stop me, but I pushed through. I saw bruises. I saw marks. I was told it was from CPR, but my gut said otherwise. I asked questions. No one had answers. No one would speak on the record, and those who knew more suddenly became unavailable, or simply vanished from the industry. Years passed, and I kept my silence because I feared for my own safety. But when the sealed files started leaking, when names began connecting, when this trial opened a wound that had never healed, I knew I had to speak, and this courtroom is the only place I can speak without being erased. The courtroom sat frozen. You could hear breaths held and pens paused. The judge leaned forward but said nothing. Janet continued. Michael once introduced me to a girl. Her name was Nevaeh. She was quiet, beautiful, scared. She had been in the industry only a short time. Michael said she had been invited to a party by someone powerful, and the next morning she had bruises. Michael was furious. He said Diddy was at that party. He never said what he saw, but he said he would never forget her face, and that she reminded him of how people treated us when we were young. He said fame was a cage and sometimes monsters had the keys. I asked where the girl was now. He said she disappeared 2 weeks after that party. Her number was disconnected. Her parents never heard from her again. Michael cried that night, and Michael did not cry often. He told me he felt helpless, that even he, with all his power, could not protect someone from them. That night he said the system was rigged, that the industry we worshipped was a haunted house, and Diddy was one of the ghosts. And now here, I am in this courtroom, and when I see the names on these documents and the testimonies that have come out, it is as if Michael is speaking again, through them, through me. Janet paused, reached for the envelope, opened it, and pulled out a photograph. The court clerk moved closer and placed it on the screen for all to see. It was a photo of Michael in a hoodie, standing next to a young girl half his age with a look of concern on his face. Written on the back was her name and the words, "If I disappear, this is why no one spoke." The silence was louder than any scream. Janet looked at Diddy again. Not with hate, but with an eerie calm. She said, I do not know everything, but I know enough, and I know what it looks like when someone is being hunted. And Michael was hunted not by shadows, not by ghosts, but by men with power and hunger, and the means to hide it. When the press called his death a misadventure, they were wrong. It was a mission, and it succeeded. But the truth refuses to die, and neither will I. The judge finally spoke. "Mrs. Jackson, your statement will be entered into record as voluntary testimony linked to pattern behavior evidence in connection with the federal investigation. Thank you for your courage." Janet nodded once and stepped down her heels, echoing across the marble floor. The prosecution team exchanged looks. The defense remained still. Diddy leaned over, whispered something to his attorney, who simply nodded and jotted a note. The bailiff called the next break, but no one stood right away. The courtroom remained suspended in the moment, as if unsure what reality had just been exposed outside. Reporters scrambled phones, buzzed the internet already lit up with hashtags and speculation. But inside that room, a legacy had just spoken, and the echo of her words would not fade easily. Not now, not ever. As Janet Jackson exited the courtroom, a quiet tension remained in her absence. The walls seemed heavier, the air thicker. The defense table sat in near stillness, but the prosecution stood ready. A new witness was called this time, a former private security contractor named Lewis Tanner. His face was calm, but his hands betrayed a slight tremble. He adjusted the microphone and began his sworn statement. "I worked for a private detail in 2008 and 2009. Our client list included high-profile individuals from entertainment, politics, and finance. I was assigned to a certain compound in Beverly Hills under a non-disclosure agreement. My assignment was simple. Observe, secure, and report, no questions asked." He paused, looked toward the jury, and continued. "One night, a man arrived in a black SUV, unregistered, no license plates, but clearly expected. He was led directly to the interior quarters, where cameras were intentionally blacked out. I was not allowed access to that floor, but one night the feed accidentally flipped back on. Just for a moment I saw Michael Jackson in that room, not performing, not visiting, but restrained on a medical gurney. I saw two other men in the frame. One matched the description of someone currently sitting in this courtroom, and the other I later recognized from leaked footage. In a separate investigation, the room went silent again as the court requested clarification, and the witness pointed directly at Sean Combs. The room shifted. Defense objected, citing lack of chain of evidence, but the judge allowed it under exception due to corroborative pattern testimony. Tanner continued, "I did not know what I was witnessing that night, but 2 days later Michael was declared dead. The footage disappeared. The system was wiped clean. We were paid double our normal rate and ordered not to speak to press, family, or police. I resigned the following month because it felt wrong. I spent years trying to forget it. But when the investigation into Sean Combs started showing connections to past disappearances and intimidation, I came forward. My story was ignored until today." Prosecution entered into evidence a written affidavit from Tanner, along with partial pay records from the same week. Michael died, suggesting double compensation and bonus incentive structure for remaining silent. The defense team whispered urgently. One lawyer stood and asked for a recess, but the judge denied it. The courtroom lights flickered slightly, as if reacting to the tension building in every corner. Then something unexpected happened. An envelope slid across the defense table from the second chair. Attorney to Diddy himself, it was unopened, unmarked. Diddy hesitated, then opened it. Inside was a single Polaroid photo, aged and creased. It showed a young Janet Jackson sitting beside Michael in a room that had a blurred figure in the background, partially visible, but clearly watching from behind a curtain. Diddy stared at it for a long time. Then, without warning, he slammed it on the table, stood up, and requested a private discussion with his legal team. Outside the hearing room, the judge allowed a brief adjournment. Chaos erupted outside as news spread like wildfire online. Forums exploded with theories. Reddit threads pulled old video clips of Michael warning about industry predators. Fans dissected every lyric, every interview, every hint that could support the testimonies inside that courtroom. The documentary crew covering the trial captured stunned reactions from former staff choreographers and even music executives, who now feared they might be next. The case was no longer about one man. It was about a system. And as the judge returned to the bench, the court braced itself for what would come next. Janet had taken a seat in the back, now no longer a witness, but an observer. She watched as the prosecution stood to present one final piece of evidence, a sealed deposition from a former studio producer who had worked on multiple Diddy and Jackson projects in the early 2000s. The deposition detailed multiple occasions where production crews were told to shut down early, or clear the room when certain guests arrived, including Diddy. It also mentioned that Michael had once privately funded his own surveillance out of fear, and that hours of footage had been recorded showing unauthorized entries into his dressing rooms and trailers. Much of that footage had been reported lost in a mysterious fire 2 months after his death. But the producer kept backups silent. Backups, and now they were in the hands of federal investigators. The judge allowed a 15-minute recess before resuming for closing arguments during the break. A journalist caught Janet outside and asked her what she hoped the world would understand from her testimony. She simply said, "I want them to know Michael tried to speak, they just never listened back." Inside the court resumed, and the defense, now visibly shaken, declined cross-examination on most witnesses, choosing instead to focus on procedure and technicalities. But the damage had been done. The jury sat wide-eyed, exhausted, emotionally charged. The judge announced that deliberation would begin the following morning, and ordered the courtroom cleared as Janet walked out. One final time she looked up at the framed portrait of justice on the wall, balanced blind and holding scales beneath it. A plaque read, "Let truth be told, for the first time in a long time the truth had been heard." Whether or not it would be believed remained uncertain, but for those who had remained silent for too long, the doors were now open. The shadows had faces, and the world was finally watching from the corner of the room. A single light flickered, one that had been off since the beginning of the trial, and as it glowed dimly above the witness stand, it felt almost symbolic, as if Michael himself had never truly left, as if his voice still echoed in every beat, every lyric, and now every testimony that dared to speak the unspeakable. The case of Sean Combs, once considered just another celebrity trial, had transformed into something else, something raw, unfiltered, and deeply historic. It was no longer about protecting brands or reputations. It was about justice, about accountability, and above all about honoring the voices that were lost in noise but never forgotten. Not by those who loved them, and not by those who finally had the courage to say enough.